Hi, I'm Rick with Bestop, and today I'm here to walk you through the installation of your new Supertop Ultra for the JL Wrangler Unlimited. We think that the Supertop Ultra is pretty easy for you to do at home, but if you decide after watching the video that you're not comfortable doing it yourself, if you purchase from bestop.com, you can select the Buy It Installed option, where a craftsman will come straight to your home and install it for you. Or if you work through your local shop, they can hook you up with someone that can do it for you as well. Before we just jump into it, we're going to step over to the table and I'm going to walk you through some of the parts that you'll see during the installation and get you familiar with all the pieces. These are all the parts that come with your Supertop Ultra. I know this might look a little bit overwhelming, but I promise if we follow the steps, we're going to get you through it no problem. Starting on this side over here, you've got the front upper door rails, the upper door rails for the rear door. These are going to be the lower rails for the rear door. These grills here are for your door rails. A great feature, you can paint these whatever color if you want to customize. Foam seals, lift assist tie down straps, sport bar pivot brackets for the rear, tailgate clips, lift assist assemblies, side bows, tailgate bar, and all of the cross-car bows. This is all the hardware that's required for mounting your Supertop Ultra. Take a little bit of time to familiarize yourself with all of these components. Some of these screws, they look very similar, but they're just a little bit different in length. All of them have a little bit different size tool. We'll go over that during the installation, and then we'll get to the rest of the parts. The kit comes with an installation instruction. We're going to follow these steps in the video, but make sure you get familiar with this before you start, and it'll make all of this a lot easier. The great news is some of these components come pre-assembled to make it a lot easier for you to put onto the vehicle, and they have part numbers on the major assemblies in case you need to refer back to the installation guide to understand maybe which side is which or which bow goes where. To assemble the rear door rails, you're going to use the U-nut, the 20mm screws, and a 4mm Allen. To put the U-clip on, it's real simple. You make sure that the threaded part is facing towards the top of the rail and you slide it right on. To complete the assembly, make sure that the ends are going the same direction so you have the right sides, and then you put them together and the screws go up from the bottom into the barrel on the U-clip. Make sure you repeat that for both door rails. To install the upper and lower grille on the door rail, you'll need a T8 Torx. Everything aligns according to where it's supposed to go, but there is a different left and right, so make sure you get the correct side when you're putting them together. Take care when installing these small screws to be sure you don't strip them out. Let's repeat those steps on the other side. We've moved back to the Jeep where we're going to put the rear door rail on. You do that by aligning the pin on the bottom with the hole in the belt rail, and the clamps go around the sport bar. There's a small post on the bottom of the clamp that goes into a hole on top of the sport bar, and when you're positioning everything, you'll feel it snap into position. When you're installing these door rails, take the time to look at the seals and make sure that nothing is pinched underneath. To secure the door rail to the Jeep, we're going to use two 80mm bolts and one 20mm bolt. They use a T40 Torx to install. The 80mm bolts go up through the bottom of the clamp and thread right into the door rail. Repeat that at the front of the rear door rail. The short screw goes on the belt line. After you've completed these steps, repeat on the other side. We've moved up to the front where we're going to install the front door rail. The rear portion here tucks right underneath the rear, and the posts go in the top hole and the clamps go underneath. Don't forget to check those seals where the door rail touches the body. You want to make sure that they're clear and not pinched. 80mm bolts go up from the bottom to secure it to the vehicle. We're going to repeat those steps on the other side. We've moved to the back of the vehicle where we're going to install the sport bar brackets. There's a trim piece that we've already removed that normally goes in this location on both sides of the vehicle. You just pull those off and you put the brackets on. To put the brackets on, you'll notice there's two pins. Those go into the sport bar. The one on the end goes to the top, and the one that's kind of in the middle goes in a small hole in the sport bar. You're going to attach those using two 28mm T40 screws. After you've got that side, repeat on the other. Tighten those up using a T40 Torx. To install the tailgate bar retainers at the rear, you find the pin that's just underneath, goes in the small hole, and you align it to the belt rail. You install with a 35mm bolt and a T50 Torx. And once you finish with that one, repeat on the other side. Now we're going to install the lift assist. The way you do that is you check to make sure that the handle with the yellow cap is facing down, and the plastic is going to be to the inside of the vehicle with the bow facing forward. There are 3 threaded studs that go into position on the mounting bracket. Secure those using an M6 nut, but just snug those up. You don't want to have them too tight because we're going to tighten them later in the assembly. To secure the tie-down strap, there's a small loop in the end that goes around the bracket. These nuts use a 10mm socket, but just snug them up. You want to leave them loose, and we're going to tighten them later in the steps. Our next step at the rear is going to be installing the rear bow, or what we call the number 6 bow. You can tell that one by all the brackets and tubes that are welded on that. The way we're going to install it is there's a small bracket here that's going to face up when you lay it inside the vehicle. Slide the end of the bow onto the bracket and then use the screws to install. We're going to install the shoulder screws with a T30 Torx. And repeat that on the other side. Our next step at the rear of the vehicle is installing the number 5 bow. You can tell the number 5 bow because it has 2 sets of larger diameter holes and 1 set of 2 smaller diameter holes on the end. Those 2 holes at the very end only go through one side, and they're going to face to the front of the vehicle. We're going to install the number 5 bow using the 30mm screws. So you'll notice there's 2 screws that look very similar. One's a little shorter, and we're going to use the longer screw. You install those using a T30 Torx. When you're installing the 5 bow, once again, make sure that those small holes are facing the front and the bow goes in front of the bracket. Use a T30 Torx to secure the fasteners. After you get this side, repeat for the other. We're going to install the pivot bracket using the same 30mm screws. The bracket goes behind to the rear of the vehicle. After you do this side, repeat for the other one. After you get all the screws in, just double check and make sure the curve on the bow is facing down. Our next step is going to be installing the side bow. Now this may look like a lot, but it's going to be real easy to put in, and it's going to make your Supertop Ultra work great. The way you tell what's front and back on this is if you open it up a little bit. There's a small little bracket welded on this end. That's the front. The piece with the hole in the back, that's the rear. And the little guide roller right here is going to face down. I've changed positions and got up on top here to make it easier for you to see. But we're going to install this side bow. All of these brackets point inboard and the guide roller points down. Kind of sneak it through here and get that guide roller in the track right here on the door rail. And then move this towards the front until it stops. After it stops, get the end just underneath the bow, because that's how we're going to attach it to the rear. We're going to install the side bow using the big shoulder bolt, the thick bushing, and the thin bushing. So the bolt and the thick bushing with the small shoulder goes inside the hole at the end of the side bow. Then the thin bushing with the shoulder goes inside the hole. And then you secure that to the rear bow with a 10mm socket. We're going to repeat those steps on the other side. After we've got the side bows secured to the rear bow there, we're going to put the rear door rail cover onto the back to make sure that guide roller stays in the track. We're going to do that using two 10mm screws and a 4mm Allen. After you finish on this side, repeat those same steps on the other side. Our next steps are going to be installing the number 4 and the number 3 bow. Now they look almost identical, but the longer one is the number 4 bow, and we're going to start with that one. But before we do that, we're going to fold the side bows down on both sides of the vehicle. Watch your fingers during this step so nothing gets pinched. We're going to put these on using the shorter 25mm screws with a T30 Torx. The 4 bow gets installed behind the bracket with the screws going through towards the front of the Jeep. Make sure that bow is pointing down, and then we're going to repeat those steps on the other side. To install the 3 bow, we're going to follow the same steps, but we're going to do it on the front side of the bracket with the screws going towards the rear. Before you go to the other side, make sure that that bow is pointing down. Our next step is going to be installing the 2 bow. Now I want you to take your time and look at the 2 bow and make sure you notice that it's got a little bit of a curve to it. And when we put it up, the high part is going to be in the middle and the low part is on the outside ends. This bow goes in front of the bracket with the screws going towards the rear. You install this bow using the same 25mm screws and a T30 Torx. Repeat on the other side. As you're finishing up, just make sure you double check that that high point's in the middle. Our next step is going to be installing the grommets into the rear bow. You'll need some super glue to complete this step. Don't glue your fingers to yourself when you do this. The grommet goes on the inboard hole. For these next steps, we've moved back to the bench just to give you an idea of what we need to do next. We're starting to install all the soft goods, and our first step is going to be removing these 4 screws on the outboard sides of the number 1 bow, but you need to set those aside because we're going to use those when we put it back on the vehicle. Remove these screws using a T20 Torx. The reason we take these off is once we put it on the vehicle, we're going to flip this over, and these are the locations where we're going to secure it to the side bows. For this next step, we're going to install the deck onto the vehicle. And what we've done is placed the fabric assembly gently on the hood, and I've got a friend that's going to help me raise the header, which is towards the vehicle, up and rotate it into position on the windshield. I've moved up on top of the vehicle here so that you can get a better view of what you're doing. You're going to put those screws through the bracket on the front of the side bow into those bosses that we showed you back on the table. We're going to install the 1 bow to the side bow using 10mm screws and a 4mm Allen. Repeat that step on the other side. After you've secured both sides of the number 1 bow, have your friend help you get the fabric pulled all the way over the top. Now we're starting to look like a soft top. Our next step is going to be reinstalling those screws that we took out in the previous step, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to do that if you can lift this 1 bow up to about the 45-degree angle. Before you reinstall the screws, take a look for the cable and make sure that it's tucked right back in that sleeve that it comes out of. If it's come out, and then you just roll it over and put the screws back in. We're going to repeat that same step on the other side. To put the foam on, make sure you separate the left from the right. For this side, you want the curve to match at the top, and the radius will match down here at the bottom. Pull off the release paper and align it. And put it in position. Make sure you roll that fabric out of the way. For our next step, we moved all the way back to the rear of the vehicle where we're going to attach the side cable to the rear number 6 bow. To attach the cable, we're going to use the binding posts. Now these might have come in the kit either screwed together or apart. Put the post in from the back and then put the cable on top and finish with the screw. Tighten it using a flat blade screwdriver. Repeat that step on the other side. Now we're going to attach the fabric to the number 5 bow here. And the way we do that is there's a flap on the outside that's got a folded piece of fabric with 2 tiny holes pre-drilled in the fabric. Put the screws through the holes, and then we're going to put that up around and onto the bow. To get the flap in position on the bow, you're going to want to raise the rear so that you can get the fabric wrapped around. We're going to pre-install the screws into the fabric flap in the small holes. After you've got those 2 screws, repeat the same step on the other side. We're going to follow the same steps to secure the fabric at the number 6 bow, but before you do that, reach down and pull the levers with the yellow tab up on both sides. And that'll make it easier to get the fabric into position to secure that flap. Pre-install the screws into the small holes before you screw it into the bow. Repeat that step on the other side. To install the fabric at the rear of the Jeep, I've climbed right inside the back and I've pre-installed the 9 screws that are going to attach it to the bow. Put the screw through the fabric side and then start at the center and work your way outside. If you did unlock the lift assist while you were doing this assembly, make sure that you get up and reach up from inside and pull it down so that it locks back into place. Do that on both sides. After that, we're going to go ahead and close the Sunrider by pulling the side bow down to the windshield. Watch your fingers, you don't want to get pinched. To secure the latch, pull down on the handle until the hook engages. You might need to press on the hook just a little bit to get it to connect, and then pull up to close. Repeat that on the other side. Now that you've secured the latches, we're going to come back and we're going to tighten up the nuts that we left loose on that sport bar bracket. That was a 10mm socket. Be careful not to over tighten these, and as you get them snugged up, we're going to switch over to a torque wrench and make sure that they're set to 7 foot-pounds. Now I've moved inside the vehicle. I'm sitting here in the back seat, and we're going to start putting the fabric onto all of the bows that go to the vehicle. So you reach up, there's a flap that's got hook and loop on both sides. That wraps around the bow and you secure it to itself. Repeat that same step for all of the bows. Now we're ready to put the quarter windows in. You can tell which side you have. The front will have the small retainer and the back has the heavy stiffener. The stiffener is always going to roll inboard when you put it on the vehicle. To install the window, find the round retainer at the top and the one on the deck and just slide it onto that towards the front of the Jeep. To install the front of the quarter window, put the flap at the top under the deck and slide the retainer into the groove on the door rail. Make sure you push it in all the way so that it engages. We're going to tuck just the first few inches of the bottom retainer into the belt rail before we move to the back. At the back on the stiffener, there's a pin at the top that goes into the grommet that we installed in an earlier step that folds around and tucks into the grommet. Our next step is going to be attaching the strap with the snap onto the tailgate retainer. Now we're going to finish the retainer at the bottom. Now we're going to repeat all those steps on the other side. Now we're ready to install the rear window. The top of the rear window has the C-shaped retainer that's going to slide on to the one on the deck. Now we're going to attach the tailgate bar to the bottom portion of the rear window. You can tell how this goes on because there's a hollow section that's going to slide onto a retainer that's at the bottom of the window. And the rubber seal is facing down and to the rear of the vehicle. To finish installing the tailgate bar, line up the tab to the notch in the retainer and you just press it right into place. Do that on both sides. Secure the sides of the rear window by clipping the retainer into the slot on the rear. Repeat that step on the other side. Our last step on the rear window is the lower retainer. It clips right underneath the tailgate clip retainer. Repeat that on the other side. Now we're going to pull the top of the deck down and line up and attach our hook and loop all the way along the top. Thanks for joining me today for the installation of our Supertop Ultra on the JL Wrangler Unlimited. If you have any questions at all, you can reach out to our customer service hotline or contact us at besttop.com. We're looking forward to seeing you out on the trail.